started a while ago and then turned off. Hi, I'm Meghann Ackerman from the city's Communications Department, and welcome to Alderman at Work. Today's guest is Ward 2 Alderman J.T. Scott. Alderman Scott was elected in 2017 and is approaching his first full year of serving on the board. Alderman Scott grew up in rural Tennessee and attended Duke University to study electrical engineering and biomedical engineering. He moved to the Boston area in 2000, and he now lives with his partner and their daughter in Union Square, where he also owns a CrossFit gym. He's interested in a variety of issues that affect Somerville residents, including economic justice, housing, LGBTQ rights, and redevelopment, especially in Union Square. Welcome to the show, Alderman Scott.
Thanks, Megan. It's good to be here. That's some deep bio research you did there. I wasn't expecting such a great intro.
You had a pretty complete website, so made it easy.
Well, it's what the kids are doing these days.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, you're wrapping up your first full year on the board. So I wanted to ask how that has been, especially, did serving your first year as an alderman kind of match up with what you thought it would be when you were considering running or when you were campaigning?
Wow, that's a great question. I can say it was a lot more than I expected. There was a lot more to be discovered, I guess is the way I'd put it. I mean, I worked too hard to get this job to start complaining about it. But, coming into it, I really knew that I wanted to focus on affordability, transparency, accountability. And particularly, we were coming off of some just catastrophic tree loss and just a real shortage of green space, especially in Ward 2. What surprised me were the things I found once I got into committee, once I started taking on all of the day-to-day functions. So I still love the constituent calls. I still love the day-to-day, just walking through the ward and bumping into people and checking in on them. But yeah, there's definitely been a lot that I wasn't expecting to find.
So were some of those surprises on issues that people cared about, or was it more the sort of mechanics of the job, or kind of a combination?
Oh, I'm still not sure I have the mechanics of the job down pat. I lean on John Long and Rose Durham and that crew to help. The city staff are amazing. But really it's just how those core values applied to more issues. For example, when it came to transparency, it was shocking. I got put onto as chairman of the Confirmation of Appointments and Personnel Matters Committee, and it was shocking how little information was shared about candidates that were up for appointment to city positions or even public safety positions. And looking into it further, especially, we live in a Me Too moment, and I'm happy to be part of a movement. But to realize that we didn't have any available information, even for the people who are supposed to be, as aldermen, our responsibility, we've watched a lot of confirmation hearings, Supreme Court confirmation hearings, for example, and it's a very relevant and present question. So to find that there was a real transparency problem there was shocking, but it's been incredible to be able to work on that over the course of the year, both with city staff and on my own researching legal precedent and what other communities in the Commonwealth do. And I'm pretty excited that that's changing. According to the administration, there's a commitment, I believe starting next week, for the first time to release tracking information and data on sexual harassment incidents in city departments, which I think is long overdue and very exciting. It's not the end, but that's just one of those fights that I didn't expect when running for office. Sometimes you just don't know what you're going to find till you get there.
Yeah, there's always something new happening, something unexpected. And you represent Ward 2, which is probably one of the busiest wards in the city right now, with a lot of development work going on, new businesses, people really being interested in that area. So what are some of the ward issues that you've been really excited to work on?
Sure. As I say, it is definitely exciting. The unexpected is happening on a daily basis down in Ward 2, especially with the amount of construction that we have going on down there. This Somerville Ave reconstruction project is about a 4-year-long project with enormous numbers of dependencies, and the engineering department under Rich Raish and Jess Fosbrook are doing an amazing job managing that. I'm really excited that one of the early things we were able to do is to add more capacity, add more engineers to that department, because, I mean, the city is definitely under construction, and a lot of that's landing on Union Square. On any given day, it's not just the streetscape project, but it's emergency gas work, it's new utilities going into some of the condo construction, or even to serve some of the new businesses. I know right now the new axe throwing bar in Union Square is anxiously tapping their feet, hoping that one piece of gas utility work can finish so that they can get their sewer utility work done and have their doors open. So, managing that in terms of a communication and transparency standpoint has been definitely a challenge, but a challenge that I think the city engineering department in particular is really just doing a great job with. Some of the new hires down there who've been focusing on that piece of communication. And obviously, I think Jackie and your department could use all the help they could get, because otherwise you'd probably spend all day answering calls from Ward 2. I know I certainly do.
We get them from everyone. That's okay.
But, outside of that, it's been really rewarding to follow up on some of the concerns that happened after the clear cutting of Beacon Street last year, and setting forth some real accountability, proving that the city of Somerville is going to pay attention and there will be consequences when the public trust is betrayed. So those are rewarding pieces. Oh, and identifying new places for green and open space. That's actually, I'm hopeful that in this very next board meeting, the last board meeting of the year, we'll be getting a request for funding for the first new park in Ward 2 in a very, very long time down on Somerville Ave. And it was a parcel that I was able to identify, bring to the city, work with the city planning staff, and hopefully we'll have ourselves a nice public process, get the neighbors' input on what kind of things they want to see in a park, and finally start adding some green space back to Ward 2. So those are really exciting things. There's also less exciting things, the trash pickup issues,
Sure.
there are rats all over my backyard issues, and with all the construction down there, that's real. But, sometimes it's big moves and big changes that we can make, and sometimes it's just the daily getting after it one piece at a time, and I'm happy to do both.
Yeah, and you had mentioned in talking about that, you're working with businesses, you're working with residents. Do you ever sort of run into times when you're getting, or you have to deal with sort of conflicting wants or needs, whether between different groups of residents or residents and businesses, and how have you kind of decided to navigate that? Because I know that can be a really tricky thing to try to figure out.
Sure. Even between neighbors, when it comes to, somebody wants to put a back porch on their house, rather than just let that sort itself out in front of a board, which is a really terribly adversarial process. I've gone out of my way to do a lot of neighborhood meetings and get neighbors together to have a conversation that's less about the opposing position of, I want to do this, well, I don't want you to do it, and rather a question of intention. What do I want for my life? What do I want for your life as my neighbor? And how can we find some way to make that work? When it comes to businesses, I think about a place that's right around the corner from where you used to live in Ward 2, a new dog. It's not a kenneling business, but it's like a doggy daycare.
Yeah,
right.
Grooming. Yeah, I've seen their signs. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're, the people I met there were nice folks. They had a really high-end modeling clientele. I swear, I think these dogs have more apps than I do in terms of pickup and drop-off and traffic management. And so working with them to make sure that their business wasn't going to be a negative impact on what's already a crowded piece of Somerville
Yeah,
Ave
very busy area.
and really small side streets that's also just smack dab in the middle of this construction zone. And then, you know, working with neighbors as they call and they have questions. All right, let's make sure that the things that we fear aren't going to come to pass, and if there is a problem, let's manage it. I haven't really, the closest thing I found to an intractable problem there was a question of somebody wanted to have outdoor seating at their bar, you know, expand their area, and they were right up next to some residential area, and again, just having a meeting right there, putting out the flyers. I love walking around the ward. I love knocking on doors and talking to people. And so having the neighbors get together in the space and look around and say, what would this feel like? You know, would it be something we welcome in the neighborhood? The answer in the end there was, yeah, we'd love this as long as it's only open until like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And the bar owner said, well, I respect that. I can't make a good enough profit to make it worth it going until that late. And so the bar owner said, look, I'm a neighbor, I'm part of a neighborhood, so I think I'll go back to the drawing board and find something else. And I love that because I really do believe that, as you know, the businesses in here are neighbors first, and it's vital to be a good neighbor. So that was the one where we couldn't find a win-win solution on. But fortunately, the business in question is just a great neighbor. I'm sure we'll find something else exciting to do there.
Yeah, and yeah, it sounds like a lot of those problems, it's more just differences of opinions of how people want to live, not necessarily that someone wants to come in and do something really damaging to the neighborhood or to their neighbor's property, and it just kind of get everyone together to talk through that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there's definitely going to be those times. The development eye is on Union Square and all over Ward 2 in the neighborhoods. Houses are being built, prepped for knockdowns or guts and conversions. There's one on Lake Street right now that, you know, has long been an empty lot with a small commercial building on it, and you know, the proposal is for 60 units and 5 stories of height there. So how do we make that work for what's honestly a quiet residential street that I walk my daughter to preschool on every day? And that process is taking a lot longer than it would be if somebody just went to the board with plans, but I think in the end we're going to get a lot better result, and I know I feel better having my neighbors involved in those processes.
Sure. And as you had mentioned, the board's final meeting for this calendar year is coming up, and then everyone will take a break for the holidays. When you come back, are there any kind of new issues that you're looking forward to starting to work on, or some holdovers from this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's much of a break, though. Honestly, it's just going to be some time away from committee meetings. I've already got the next 2 weeks fully scheduled with neighborhood meetings on developments and parks and some things that honestly just haven't been able to fit into the schedule with how many committee meetings we've been having. But that being said, once we get back in the full legislative calendar, I am excited to push forward, particularly on the condo conversion ordinance, which is one that I would have hoped we could have passed already, but it's been a very busy year. The condo conversion ordinance is dear to my heart because actually before I even took office, after the election, we found out that the Millbrook apartment building, which is just down the road in Ward 2, right near the Cambridge line, was 100 units of people who had just moved in a year and a half ago, including 15 affordable subsidized units. And the developer that owned it just decided they'd make more money selling those as condos and told everybody to get out of the building. It's a terrifying moment, especially when you consider that first, last, and security on some of those places, that's over $9,000.
Yeah.
And that, even if you have a great job, an unplanned expense of $9,000 is not going to get you there.
That's tough, yeah.
And that's not even to speak of the income restricted tenants who had literally won the lottery to have that home, and then to be told a year and a half later, sorry, you're back on the street. So it was great to work with Rep. Mike Connolly to do some tenant organizing there and to actually get the mayor involved to put that final push on the developer. In the end, we were able to guarantee that all those limited income people would be able to keep their units forever. broker a deal with the Somerville Community Corporation, affordable housing developer, to keep those affordable forever, and also to get those relocation expenses covered and have a cash payment to the people that lived in that building. In the end, it was over $1 million in cash benefits for those residents, but more importantly, serve now as the basis for the condo conversion ordinance that's in front of the board. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited. It's an opportunity for us to take a 35-year-old ordinance and update it and make it the best in the region, really leading the way. And I think this board's been really great at that, honestly. When I look at the recreational marijuana ordinance that was passed recently, tomorrow I'll be down at Boston City Council. They invited me to come down to present on that because it's also a groundbreaking piece of legislation that really puts equity at the forefront, takes our goals, our dreams, our shared values, and turns them into actionable public policy. And so it's really exciting to see neighboring cities say, yeah, I want to follow what Somerville does. And I'm excited to do just more and more of that in the next term. Condo conversion is the first piece of it, but there's a lot.
Yeah, and obviously housing just in general being a huge issue. And as you said, very active with condo conversions. Are there other aspects of that? Because it's clearly not a one silver bullet solution to any of that.
Yeah, boy, I wish it was.
Be a lot easier.
I mean, frankly, yes, there are pieces. There are pieces like the community land trust that I spent a lot of time talking about on the campaign trail, which isn't ultimately a government-run solution. It's a community-run solution where we have cooperative ownership of the land in our neighborhoods and can guarantee affordability and public use of that land for housing forever. It takes the question of what gets built in our neighborhoods out of the hands of whatever development has a suitcase of cash at the right time and puts it into the neighbors. So I'm really excited about that. A task force was formed up, I want to say about 7 months ago, and has been meeting very regularly. In fact, there's another meeting of it tomorrow, and I'm hopeful that we'll be incorporating that right in the first part of January. So we will actually have the first community land trust in Somerville. And then it's going to be a question of finding the ways as a government that we can support it with staffing, but also with funding and helping that to become a real force for good and for affordability. That being said, look, I think I would love to see us in a place like Vienna, Austria, right, where 80+% of the housing is publicly owned, and housing, really treating housing as a human right. But in order to get there, we're going to have to work with our colleagues in the State House, our incredible state delegation with Connolly, Provo, and Jalen, as well as state reps all over the state to get our transfer fee actually enacted. And that could be a 3-year organizing challenge. It's going to take us working at the federal level with our newly representative-elect Ayanna Presley. In addition to her gun violence push, she's on board with the Green New Deal that Ocasio-Cortez has put out. Ocasio-Cortez, of course, a comrade from Democratic Socialists of America. And, you know, we're going to need that push to change the way we think about affordability and housing, and not just healthcare as a human right, but housing as a human right at every level, from the local to the federal. And so it's exciting to see people getting into office at all those levels that are in on that fight and ready to push forward.
Yeah, so talking about some of the cooperation between different levels of government, I know one thing that tends to surprise a lot of people, and I don't know if this was something you had kind of already looked into before joining the board, is how much needs to go through the state for cities and towns to make changes. I know at one point, and I don't know if this was true or just something someone said in jest, but that Somerville was submitting more home rule petitions than anyone else, trying to get things changed. And as you said, you know, we have a great state delegation that I think very patiently takes all of those and works on them. But coming in, was that surprising to you? You know, how much kind of we can't do on our own? And
No, honestly, there's, I was aware of it. I actually worked for many years working on different transgender rights bills as we went from just some basic protections to full public accommodation protections just in my activism over the years. And so I got a pretty good sense of how some of that process works, and that how the state legislature can really be a bottling point even for localities that want to do something truly meaningful and progressive. With that said, though, it's a back and forth. When you look at the recreational marijuana licensing regulation that went through at the state level, that MGL 94G, that has an enormous amount of local control built into it.
Right.
And so it's important, it's in fact vital that you have bold activist leadership at both of those levels. Because in the case of the marijuana ordinance, the state set the table and said, hey, look, it's really up to the cities and towns to decide how aggressive they want to be. And when it comes to these home rule petitions, when we put them forward, when we push, when we organize around them and get other cities and towns putting forward similar bills, which will be happening on the transfer fee, it sends a clear message to the delegation as a whole. It lets the folks know out in Ayer or Greenfield that this is important, and it's not just the loonies down in Somerville. It's actually a lot of us, and so that's why I think it's vital to be able to lead the way. I love the work that our state delegation does, and frankly, I can't think of anybody better than the people we have. Our entire state delegation was actually ranked as the most progressive members of their respective bodies recently. So hard to ask for better there. But I thought we could do a little better here, and I'm excited to be part of that.
Sure. And you've mentioned the recreational marijuana ordinance a couple of times, and I know that just very recently passed. So would you like to just talk a little bit about that, explain to the folks watching what happened there?
Yeah, I'm afraid it's just kind of on the top of my mind because I'm preparing for this presentation tomorrow. But honestly, it's not that complicated. It's a matter of making sure that when recreational marijuana opens up as a business opportunity, that opportunity benefits the neighborhood, that it benefits the people who have been disproportionately arrested, incarcerated, punished by the war on drugs, and hopefully that the enormous financial windfall of opening up this new market actually flows to the people who have been most oppressed by it, and also to local residents. So that means creating a bulwark against big pot coming in from California or Colorado, making sure that the local partners who have set up their medical distribution centers are really incentivized to help small business, to help local actors and these economic empowerment applicants, as the state classified them, get into business. And so it's an I go, you go alternating system where we want these shops to open up, but we want to make sure that they're opened up by either locally owned enterprises, over 50% Somerville ownership, co-ops, people running in a slightly less extractive capitalistic model, or people who meet the classification of an economic empowerment applicant, meaning somebody who's in social justice work, in economic justice work as part of the structure of their business, or has majority ownership of the minorities that have been targeted, in Latinx and African American communities who have been impacted. So in that way, I think we've got a great system set for the existing vertically integrated medical distributors to help those small businesses get open. And we've also got a 2-year period in where nobody from out of state, where none of these big pot companies can come in, giving everybody on the local level 2 years to get established. And one thing that I'm particularly proud of is we've got a ratio built in so that in perpetuity there will be justice in that business here, that you can never have more out-of-state players or conglomerates with licenses to do business here in Somerville than the small local operations. And that's important to me because we've seen all over this country, there are states where Walmart is the biggest employer, and that's an absolute crying shame. You know, having grown up in a small town, and in some ways Somerville really still is, it's those small local owned businesses. sometimes generations-long ownership of these businesses that employ families, employ people in Somerville, and I want to make sure that that's always protected from the big players. So there's a lot of little pieces there, but ultimately it's not complicated. It's just a matter of translating our values and our desires for a better city and a better society into actionable public policy. Yeah. That was probably a more complicated answer than it needed.
No, I think especially for folks who haven't been following this as closely, it's kind of a good explanation for something that, there's a lot of information on both sides out there about, so at least kind of understanding what's in Somerville's laws and, knowing what's going to be happening here moving forward. And it sounds like other cities and towns are also interested, so it could be maybe a regional or, spreading across the state at some point.
Yeah, that's the hope. I've gotten a lot of phone calls since we put it into law back in early November. And there's a lot of questions still out there. The board still has in front of them the zoning, which is really the question of where these shops can go, which is a conversation I have to stay out of because my neighborhood is covered with those locations. And so state conflict of interest law keeps me out of it, but I trust my colleagues will find an equitable solution.
Sure. And I know you're also a big fan and supporter of the arts, and with Union Square right in your neighborhood, your ward hosts a lot of our great arts events. So what are some of your favorites? What are some things you like to get out to every year? Any recommendations for folks who maybe haven't been coming out to Union Square for some of those fun parties?
Absolutely. I love the Somerville Arts Council. I love the work they do, and I swear every dollar we spend there as a city is just, I'm not sure there's better money we spend in terms of bang for our buck. The only problem I have with the Arts Council is they don't host every event in Union Square, but that's an option. No, kidding. Some of my favorites, the Arts Council just recently actually did some public art installations in 3 different places around the city. The new mural in Union Square is absolutely breathtaking. It's kind of a destination, and I'm glad that it's part of the street art fabric that we've knit together there. In terms of events that happen, I know Fluff is the big headliner, but I'm going to give an unpopular opinion here.
All right.
I'm going out on a limb. This is hard-hitting journalism.
Okay.
Fluff is not my favorite festival in the
That's
square.
fair.
I love it. Some of my neighbors have been actively involved in putting it on for a long time. Professor Fluff is a personal neighbor and friend. But I will say that I love some of the smaller events. I love the evolution of Hip Hop Festival that's been growing over the last few years and really reminds me of what Fluff was back at its very earliest days. And I would love to see that as a centerpiece festival for Union Square going forward. But these things organically take time to grow. I'm particularly fond of the Ignite Festival, which had started out as an underground event, and then the Arts Council found it and said, this is amazing. Can we help you make this happen? And so I've been actually performing at that for years, and now just happy to go and enjoy the spectacle. So those are 2 big ones. Honk, I love that Honk starts in Union Square. Yep. It's kind of the secret pre-opening on Thursday night. Honk is definitely, if I had to pick a favorite citywide, I'd say it's probably Honk. And I love that I wish it all happened in Union Square, but I love that it starts there.
Yeah, we do have to share with the rest of the city
I suppose so. Alderman Davis is welcome to keep it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Alderman at Work, and we will see you next time.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.